Hello, this is Sculpt January number 13, and the topic this time was punk. And I chose to do a punk character. I hadn't done a female character yet, so I thought that'd be fun and good practice. I did do some female eyes, but I haven't done that many female figures, so as I said, needed the practice. So I started off using the skin modifier this time. I thought that'd be different and a useful workflow to get used to. But I had some trouble. I couldn't seem to get the Boolean modifier working when there was a bit of a glitch in the skin modifier. And I thought, I'm going to give up on that and try a different workflow. So I just tried sort of blobs, edited blobs, which are probably slightly more helpful anyway. And then putting cylinders in and things like that. So I got the base shape with those, and that was relatively successful. It would probably be helpful to have background images. I usually like to sketch my own designs of characters and so forth. I like the idea of sketching my own characters, and I don't really like using other people's. I don't know why, it just feels like I'm cheating in some weird way. Not that people are by using other people's character references, but I feel like I'm cheating myself because I should be drawing those and getting used to that as well. So I have got lots of reference images, but I'm reluctant, probably stupidly, to put them in as background images and therefore almost copy them. So for the legs, instead of doing the cylinder, I did the snake hook tool and pulled it out. Which is okay, it's probably about the same speed really, so whichever workflow you're happy with perhaps. I did try this time. I thought for a change, instead of having it on constant detail, I'd have it on relative detail. So when you zoom in, it gets more detail. Whereas constant detail stays the same detail all the way around, whether you zoom in or out. And I actually gave up on that in the end. I think I'm getting used to the constant detail and preferring that, so I'll probably do that in future. So I feel like I'm kind of used to where I need to be in terms of detail levels. This took a silly amount of time once again. I had big plans. I was going to create the base mesh and then start doing lots of clothing and interesting bits and pieces, spikes and all sorts. And it ended up in total taking about 8 hours again. And I actually this time decided to finish earlier than I feel I should have done in a sense. I feel the model's unfinished anyway. I'm happy with how it turned out, but I'm not happy with the amount of time it took me. I wanted it to look quite sort of cartoony, but not too cartoony. I really haven't set on any sort of style. Someone was saying on the chat, how long did it take you to develop your style? Well, I really don't feel I'm there with it actually. And I really want to get some sort of signature style like some people have. I hadn't done a lot of clothing before, and the boots I found really hard. So I kept going away from them and coming back to them. I think that's quite a good plan if you're getting frustrated with a part, just to go away, come back to it. It's funny, looking back at these, you can see how distorted my anatomy was. Even though I was using reference images, I came back to my arm here and thought, why on earth have I made it so long? And then started pulling that around, and then I made it too short, and then I pulled it back again. So even though I've got reference images in front of me, I'm still making lots of mistakes. And for some reason the head's quite high up as well. I'm not sure why I did that either, but I suppose that's why we're practicing, and learning all the time. I do feel like I've got a lot better just over the last 13 days, so hopefully I'll be doing even better stuff by day 31 if I haven't collapsed. Now, I still had relative detail on, so I'm zoomed in and it's going really high detail, and I'm thinking, wow, this is quite nice, isn't it? And then it dawned on me I'm going to end up with a hugely high poly mesh if I keep zooming in and out like this, and it made me feel a bit uncomfortable because I've not got a extremely powerful graphics card. It's pretty good, a GTX 980, but I have come up against issues when going too high poly. So again, that's another sort of learning curve, whereas if you've got constant detail on, then you're much more comfortable and know exactly what you're ending up with. Now I'm trying something different here. Because I'm doing clothing, I'm trying the Sculpt tools add-on and using the grease cut. So using the grease pencil to draw a line and then pressing grease cut to cut the shape into pieces. Now this was a great idea in theory, and I'd seen someone do this, but later on in the model, when I came to join them back together, it ended up causing me a lot of difficulty. Because I wanted to rig the model like I had in the past, I created an armature, but it didn't join to the mesh, or the other way around, the mesh didn't join to the armature, because there was overlapping polys. So when I joined it back together with the Boolean operation, it wasn't happy basically and created all these polygons on the inside. So it's not something I would steer clear of because it's actually a really useful tool, and being able to separate your mesh out is really handy. So you can go high poly, for example, because you're only working on one mesh and you can isolate that mesh and work on it. And the fact that you isolate a mesh means that you can create sort of seams and edges where the clothes overlap the body. But you must be careful when you're putting them back together that you haven't got bits on the inside of your mesh. So you can see I'm having difficulty here where it's not creating a solid mesh and it wasn't separating properly, and it ended up with lots of holes in it. Some holes you can get rid of, lowering the detail to really low and then drawing over it, and that seems to recalculate the mesh and sort those problems out. But it doesn't always work if you've got lots of holes, and that's where the Boolean tool is really useful in the Sculpt add-on. I haven't done clothes a lot before, so it was actually really tough and much harder than I remembered. Maybe I just didn't do them very well in the past. The boots I came back to thinking, oh, I've got to tackle these sooner or later. I got up a few reference images, changed the style lots. I have tried to do boots before and I was quite unsuccessful with them. So I was a little bit scared of them, and rightly so. I think what I'm finding tough sometimes with the challenge is that I'm using reference images, but I haven't finalized in my head exactly what I'm doing. So I'm changing my mind as I go along. So I should really steer clear of big projects like whole characters in this case. But I'm sure I'll do the same mistake tomorrow. I think it's magic tomorrow. We'll see how we go. But as always, I would recommend setting a time limit on your sculpts. I suppose I'm a bit lucky because I'm a part-time teacher. On my days off I can have a go at sculpting, but I'm still finding it very tough to keep up with. I think I'm quite a way in here, about a few hours, and I thought I'd try a different technique. I should have just kept it simple at this point, but there's an extract tool in the Sculpt add-on, so I thought I'd extract a sort of bracelet that would have studs on or spikes on. That worked quite well actually, but I just simplified it later because I was running out of time again. I did the same thing for the belt. I came back to that later and got rid of the extraction and just drew a belt in because it's a bit faster. So the eyes are obviously a bit bigger than normal, and I'm trying to go for that cartoony character. Not sure whether I quite pulled it off. It kind of worked, but not completely. I thought I'd put on some of these sort of tight stocking thingamajigs that punks wear. Of course, all female punks wear those. It's their uniform. I had a bit of a dilemma here whether to go out of symmetry early on or not, because obviously going out of symmetry is great because it adds interest and detail to your mesh, and it makes it much more lifelike. But as soon as you go out of symmetry, it's tough to go back, and so you have to be in a place where you think you're doing the last few details. So you really have to know that you're finishing in a sense. So I was starting to panic about the amount of time I'd spent on it at this point, so I thought, right, I'm going to just do some hair quickly. I didn't want to do the traditional spiky hair. I wanted to do something different that I saw on one of my reference images, which I thought was quite cool. A sort of swiping side hair ponytail thing. And I made this far more complicated than it needed to be, but I started to simplify things with just cylinders and spikes after a little while. So I'm starting to get towards the end here, and it's looking okay, pretty pleased with it, and I was ready to rig, so I built an armature just after this bit, and that's when I realised it wasn't connecting, and it was going to take me another couple of hours to sort out by going in and deleting lots of bits of mesh and so forth. So I decided that this time I would leave the rigging out and just have a basic model. I still did the baking in Blender Render of the ambient occlusion, the cavity and the normal map. Again, I will do a tutorial on that as soon as I can. If I'd stopped spending 9 hours on these models, maybe I'd get a chance to do it. So I forgot I had mirror turned on at this point, and I was doing a belt, and you can see it on both sides, and I thought, oh dear. And that's when I decided I need to turn mirror off and start doing these finer details. I should have done this earlier, really. And started sort of designing the shorts a bit. But the creases aren't great. You can tell I'm rushing a bit here, and I need more practice for clothing. But there we go, we can start to see it working out roughly. Not too bad anyway. The top I found really difficult. I was looking for reference images, and I just couldn't seem to find anything that was suitable. They're all really tight or really loose, and none of them sort of in between like this. I must be out of fashion with this top that I've chosen here. So there we have it, number 13, Punk. Thank you very much for all your comments. If you managed to get all the way through this video, it's quite a long one today. And the links are in the description. So head over to Sculpt January and see what other people have done. I'll see you there.